Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ. Welcome to today's user share webinar. We're going to take a deep dive into app layering. Some of you may be a little bit familiar with it. Some of you may not know anything about it, but wherever you are, and you're going to learn a lot about it today and from a very good source. Before we jump in, though, I have just a couple of things for you. In the chat, there is a link to the CUGC events calendar, and you'll see that we have a lot of upcoming CUGC to go events and our Excel events and more webinars. Our CUGC to go events are what our local meetings were. Since we can't meet in person, we're meeting virtually. So we have a lot coming up. In fact, right after this webinar today, the Tampa group is meeting at noon Eastern. And also you can see, I think, yeah, Saudi Arabia is in July. That's their very first meeting. So I'm excited to see what they do. But also we're excited that we're able to pull off our Excel events, and those were big day-long events. We had multiple speakers and just lots of knowledge sharing and great networking and a great community event. And we finally found a way to do those online. So we're really excited. The next one is going to be July 16th, the Great Lakes XL. And then in August, we'll have Northeast XL. And our moderator today, Carl Webster, will be actually speaking at that event. So be sure to check those out. All right, so I just have a couple of housekeeping details for you, and then I will let you loose. Today is being recorded. You'll get a link to that recording. It's going to come to you in an email from GoToWebinar, so just be on the lookout for that. We'd also like you to submit your questions anytime you have them. We're going to take some during the presentation and some after. It just depends on what you ask and where Jeff is. But put them in when you have them, and so you don't forget them, and we'll keep an eye on those. And finally, at the end, I'm going to throw a link in the chat for you to a short survey. It's anonymous. We just like to get your feedback on our webinars. Okay, so keeping an eye on all of your fantastic questions that you're going to ask today is Carl Webster. He is a CTP fellow and a very active member in the CUGC community. If you don't know who he is, shame on you, just kidding. But he's going to keep an eye on all your questions. Carl, would you like to say hello?
Hey, everybody. Glad you're here.
Awesome.
That's it.
And now you know who Carl is. So you can't say.
And finally, presenting for us today is Jeff Pitsch. Jeff is an independent EUC evangelist, but he has been involved with app layering for a long
Since
time.
the beginning.
And I will let him tell you more about that and also talk about some of his recent endeavors. So with that, Jeff, I'm going to hand things right on over to you, and you'll see a link there. I'm going to put that in the chat for you guys as well while he's getting you going. So Jeff, if you're ready for me to send you the screen, I will do that.
I am ready.
All right, here it comes, and then I'll grab that link for you guys.
Let me, whoop, wrong screen, of course. All right, how does that look? Is it sharing? Oh, no, now.
I see it.
Okay,
Yep.
Perfect. All right, so first off, to kind of pimp myself out a little bit here, I've been doing EUC for, well before it was named EUC. Back in the terminal services, MetaFrame, presentation server days, WinFrame is when I started, and been a part of the community again since the very beginning. So it's been an interesting ride, and I really do consider these COVID days to be the watershed moment for all of us involved in EUC, the remote delivery of desktops and applications. This is our moment to shine, and hopefully we are. And this sets a tone for the future for more people to be able to work remotely, whether it be at home or somewhere else. to be able, to enjoy life a little bit more without having to be in the office 8, 9 hours, 5 days a week. One thing I did want to pimp was the Thrive IT. Thrive-IT.com that DJ Eshelman and I are doing. If you go to the YT page of it, that will get you to our YouTube channel, where once a week we do a live broadcast with guests, without guests, non-technical, talking about careers. Everything involved from this is how I screwed up, or DJ's got a great story of how he got fired because he wrote a blog, things like that. So, and this past week we actually had Ron Oglesby. Before that, we had George Curavilla from CITRIX talking about performance reviews from the employer side, from the employee side, all that good stuff. But you are not here for that. You are here about layering. So the way this came about was, I can't pronounce his last name because I just can't pronounce it, but Mark from Login VSI was on a couple weeks ago talking about performance with CITRIX App Layering, or as many of us know it, I still call it Unidesk. And that got me, as I was watching the questions and things come through, it made me realize that there's still a lot of confusion on what exactly is layering. What does it do? How does it work? What are the differences between all these, these different products? So today, my goal in to accomplish is to hopefully give everybody that's on today and watches later a base knowledge of what exactly this is. What is this layering? What does that term mean? Because the term does not mean the same as it did when Unidesk first came around. How is it used? And, so we'll get into the architecture of 4 different products. We're going to talk about Unidesk, CITRIX App Layering, of course. We will talk about VMware App Volumes, and then we'll jump over to Liquidware Flux App. And last but not least, the new entry into this will be MSIX App Attach from Microsoft and how that fits in to all of this. So the most important thing for me is that I want to be sure that any and all questions you have are answered. And I am really trying to be as unbiased as I can, because I am not selling any of these products. They are, truthfully, they all have their advantages. They all have their disadvantages. None of them are what I would say are truly bad products you should never touch. But there are some that are definitely better than others. But again, it also all depends on your situation, what you're using, what your requirements are, those types of things. There we go. So layering. Layering is an interesting term now, because in the beginning, when Unidesk came around and app volumes, cloud volumes at the time were out there, layering was literally layering, building on top of another layer. We had diagrams we called hockey pucks. You'll see those in a bit. You can think of them as a stack of pancakes, but that's literally what layering was. It was a literal definition of that term. First off, layering is a technology. It is not a product. Layering is a means to an end. And we're going to talk, there's a couple ways that layering is done now. And that, I think, is where the major confusion comes in, is that layering has become an umbrella term, and it's, people think that all products under the layering umbrella act and behave essentially the same, and they don't. There are
Hey,
basically
Jeff.
two camps. There is layering, traditional layering, and then there is the attachment side of things. Liquidware and Microsoft's MSIX App Attach are those technologies. They actually do an attachment versus layering on top of another. And we'll get into advantages, disadvantages of both.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
So obviously, I've not seen your slide deck. So when we talk about air quotes here, app layering, there's actually layering, app masking, app virtualization, app isolation, install every app in the image and use
Yep.
masking, to hide or unhide apps. So there's lots of different terms that are thrown about in that people think all mean the same thing, but they really don't. So
Yep.
are you going to
And
go into those various differences?
um, I am going to do some comparison. So you actually jumped 2 points ahead of me. You're good.
Oh,
You're good. You
okay.
can read my mind. No. So
Oh
what
God,
we
that's a
are,
scary thing.
what's that?
I said, oh God, that's a scary thing.
It really is, dude. I wouldn't delve too deep into my head.
I
It's
know
a
because you're into
scary
hockey.
place. Exactly. Hey, the Predators, man. You got Nashville down there.
Yeah.
Um, so as I said, so attaching is the other side of this. And then typically when people ask about layering, no matter what the app is, they are, what I have found is that typically they are asking about the functionality of dynamically delivering applications to endpoints, whether it's based on, delivering an app to the endpoint or to the user using the endpoint. That is typically what I have found people are asking about. And obviously, the CITRIX App Layering, that is the one that is the most different in it can do that, but that's not really its main function. And we'll get into that in a little bit. And then, whoops. Oh, I didn't put it on the slide. So I did forget to put that in there. There was supposed to be a line here that basically said, we're not going to talk about app v, thin app, application masking, because really those are not layering technologies that are typically thought of in the umbrella. And in Webster, you are right. That is, people do tend to lump them together, but I think they also understand that they are not quite the same. AppV, the virtualization technologies are similar. The big difference being there's no isolation of a layered application. Doesn't matter how it's delivered, the application is not isolated, and we'll delve more into that. And the app masking, I thought about that, like talking about it like I will the other products, but didn't really want to confuse the issue with app masking, because you're right, app masking is simply installing everything and the kitchen sink on an image and then using something like the FS Logix product based on user group, whatever, to hide or to unhide applications as they need them. It's different enough that I didn't want to include it. So some general characteristics of layering. These are generally what all the products have in common. So easy packaging. AppV, if you've ever packaged for AppV, what I've seen in the past is that you have to have very specialized knowledge of AppV in packaging applications. There are people that have made their living packaging app-v applications. That's like all they do. With app layering, with layering, you could take somebody off the street and have them package an application. It is very much the same paradigm as packaging for SCCM or any of those, types of products. There's nothing real special you need to know. Yes, there may be some cleanup of what was captured, but you don't have to have real specialized knowledge. It's actually fun to watch when people get it, and it's almost literally, start the capture, run the installer, next, finish, stop the capture. I mean, it's for the most part, it's that simple. Apps are delivered by mounting disks. Now, this is one of the big differences between app-v and app masking. App-v is its own virtual environment. It is completely virtualized, completely isolated away from the operating system. So the apps are actually installed onto, captured onto these disks. If you mounted the disk on a system and actually browsed through the file system, you would see the file system that was captured just as if it was installed locally. There's typically not zips or anything like that that have to be undone. It's just all right there. The registry pieces are captured and stored on the disk as well. So what happens is when a user logs in or a machine is booted, depending on the product, some can do app machine boot as well, you have a service or an agent that is doing the mounting, going out, querying something, and we'll talk about architecture of the various products, but they get this list of apps and the service, the agent mounts those disks. It could be any number of disks. It could also be that you have multiple apps on these disks. It doesn't have to be one app per package. And then you have the filter driver. Some are using kind of the full filter drivers. A lot of them are using mini filter drivers now. But basically, it's the filter driver that virtualizes the C drive and the registry so that everything appears to be a single disk or a single registry. The registry is done differently a little bit based on product. Some of them do virtualize those parts of the registry that are brought in from the layer, where it's literally just kind of running in memory. Others are actually kind of run a reg like .exe to import in the registry settings. They're in there and then they get removed when the endpoint is shut down or the user logs off or what have you. The other thing that I really thought was much more general, but I'm finding out really isn't. It's kind of a 2 versus 2. 2 products do this, 2 products from what I can see right now do not, which is session isolation for things like RDSH multi-user systems. This is where this comes into play. Session isolation is the ability to, when an app is mounted, it's mounted, you've got 50 users on an RDSH server, and you only 10 of those users have access to a particular application. Even though the disk is mounted to the server, the filter driver hides that application, much like app masking does, from the other 40 users that don't have access to it. So the disk is attached, it's there. 40 users cannot see or use the app. They have no idea it's there. These other 10 users on that same server see it and can use it normally. The other thing with app layering, like I said, it's not an isolated bubble like an app V or thin app. A layered package, a layered application has full access to the operating system and to any other app that is on the endpoint, whether it's another layer, whether it's installed locally or even brought in through some other mechanism. So what this means is you could layer plugins for Office, for Outlook, for Excel, whatever, or anything else. Office could be in the base image. The plugins are all layered and delivered to those users that need them, and they use them. So it's actually pretty cool when you can do that type of thing, because a lot of times when you get into, say, places like law offices that have plugins galore for Word and Excel for what they do, but not everybody needs all of them. And so, you have options. You could probably do masking, I'm assuming, with plugins, but this is very simple in that you can have the various ones. You can have them in one package, multiple packages, but only those that need them get them, especially when you're talking about multi-user environments. So we're going to talk about 4 products. Like I said, we have the layers and the attachments. Something sounds like band names. CITRIX App Layering will be the first one, Unidesk. This is obviously the one that, well, yeah, still know the best. Flex App would be the other one. App Volumes, I know very well, and App Attach, we are all getting to know. But we're going to cover the first 2. These are the traditional layering products that are out there. So to dive into that, so if you watch this build, this is the traditional layer stack. You have your various layers. The operating system is at the bottom. If there is a writable layer, it is at the very top. And it reads, when the filter driver looks for a file, it reads from the top down. And when it finds the first instance of a file or registry setting, that's the one it uses. So the interesting thing is, if you watched how this built out, do it again, it was all one layer at a time. So it was interesting when Mark was doing his presentation on the performance with Login VSI and measuring it. There is a definite hit on login. Now, there are ways to somewhat get around it, but the reason that more apps equals more login time for these layering products is because they have to be mounted one at a time. So app 1 has to be finished mounting before app 2 can start. App 2 has to be done before app 3, so on and so forth. So it's one at a time as opposed to in parallel, like the attachment guys can do. So that is one of the reasons why when you first start playing with whether it's Elastic Layers or VMware App Volumes, a lot of times they will talk about, put more into a layer, put more into a pack and onto a disk, multiple applications, because that does speed up logins. CITRIX App Layering does have the ability now to delay the mount of apps until after the user is logged in. Depending on the application, that will fly, that may not fly, depending on, do they need it right away? Do they not need it right away? But in the end, it's still doing them one on top of the other. So from a file system perspective, this is really what it looks like. At the top there, you can see this is what Windows sees. And so you've got file 1 and 2, that go all the way through because there is no conflict. This is basically the virtual C drive. Conflict between 4. So it only sees out of the light blue app2 layer. And personalization, user layer, writable layers, whatever you want to call them, these are always on top, always. No app will be above it. The reason is because it is writable, and if they make a change, it needs to be captured. And you know, the assumption being that if a user makes a change, that's going to trump. They're doing it on purpose, therefore it will trump everything else. Trying to decide if I want to go into writable layers or not and have a discussion on that, but I probably will in a few minutes. And then, so this is where layer priority comes in, is that with CITRIX App Layering, VMware App Volumes, they do have ways of switching app priority. So if if 4 is conflicting and you need app layer 1 file 4 to be the one that is used, you can change those app priorities. If you start getting into manipulating app priority at a large level, unfortunately, you do kind of need to keep track of that yourself. There's really nothing that I've seen in either product that keeps track of really what you've done. And then you've always got to be careful when you're updating one app or one package, one layer versus another. It can be weird. So you just want to be aware. You can change app priority, may not be the best way to resolve an issue.
Hey, Jeff,
Yeah.
question, why would you have the same file in different layers?
Applications install the same file. Different applications install jeff.dll for whatever reason. Maybe it's, they have the same name for some reason. It happens. And especially where it happens is between the OS and the application. Maybe the OS has, a DLL in System 32, but App 1 requires a slightly different version of that DLL. So it installs it because it saw that it was not the right version for it. So it installs it into the layer. And therefore, now you have 4 overriding the operating system.
All right, so how do you tell which layer the file was pulled from?
Oh, that's where the fun begins. It's not easy. The troubleshooting that we've used in the past is if you think there is a conflict, and I will admit this may have changed recently, but I don't really think it has, is that you would basically split your delivered layers in half, the ones that you think are having a conflict, right? So say you've got 6 layers. You would deliver 3 to one endpoint, the other 3 to the other endpoint. Do they conflict? Yes, no, depending on, you split it again. You keep doing halves until you figure out which are the 2 layers that are conflicting. It's a very time-consuming process, and it doesn't always work. Most of the time it does, but that's the way to really find a file conflict.
Okay, we got 3 other questions.
Sure.
Okay, so I guess this is CITRIX App Layering. ELM does merge layers to create master image. Well, actually, yeah, so this is a question. ELM does merge layers to create master image, which doesn't affect performance? Question mark. So I don't know if
Yes.
he's making a statement or if he's actually asking a question if it affects performance.
Either way, they're correct, whoever it is. And I'll get into that. Actually, we're going to talk about the CITRIX App Layer and the Unidesk thing here in a minute. But you are right, because it is a merged disk. It is a single disk. When you look at, there are no layers in that merged disk. Now, the interesting thing is the reason why building those images does take time is because what it does is it makes a copy of the OS layer. Then it has to copy app 1. When it's done, copy app 2 for this exact reason, for layer priority. So it keeps copying. And then the last thing it actually copies, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, is that when you're building that and you've got oh, now I forgot the name. Oh, this is bad. The layer where all your agents and tools go into.
Platform layer.
Yes, platform layer. Thank you. The platform layer is actually applied last when it's building the image, because that's got typically very critical components in it that have to have the right file system. So, it could have the VDA, it could have any, cloud tools in it or whatever.
And it's also got the
So,
domain join information in it.
typically you don't have your layers joined to the domain.
No, the platform layer is the one where they typically will say join it to the domain, immediately log off, log in as the local admin, and delete the domain profile that was put in there, so that the domain information is in the image and it has the highest priority. So all your domain information, that's the only layer that has to be joined to the domain. They actually
That
tell
is
you.
new to me, actually. That is new to me, because we always said never have a layer joined to the domain, whether it was platform, OS, app. We always let the provisioning tools handle the domain join. Although MCS might be different, I forget now. But like PVS has its own domain join mechanism. So when I was doing this, to me it was always keep it off the domain unless you had to install an app. But then you're right, you would go in and remove it from the domain afterwards.
Yeah. Okay. So questions are starting to pile up now. In a shared desktop environment, does each user load a layer, or are all the layers shared between users if they both have access?
So that's actually part of the great part about session isolation, or any attachment into a multi-user OS, is that it only gets mounted once. So what does that mean? We talked about how when you log in to a layering system, it has to do one at a time to build up that stack. In a multi-user system, the first user to log in that needs that application and it isn't already attached, they see the hit from attaching the application. Everyone else that logs in after them has no hit, or nearly small that you wouldn't notice it.
Okay.
So it's only attached once, and it's the filter driver that does the masking whether a user has access to it or not.
Okay. All right. So you can use layers to test application updates before deploying to production?
Yes, but you wouldn't deliver the same app twice. So
Yeah.
what I mean by that is, you've got your production version of Adobe Acrobat, and you've got now this new version you want to test. You wouldn't want to deliver the test version to those users using the production version. The reason for that is the layer priority. typically the new app, which in this case will be the test, would override the older application, because layer priority is typically determined by installation, creation date, and time. So that's very critical to remember, is that time plays into that as well, not just date. And that can, so basically you can wreak havoc by sending the same application, even if it's different versions, to the same system. Whether it's session isolated or not doesn't really matter. It can really mess things up for users. So you'd still want a test system to be able to have those users test the new applications.
All
If
right.
you're delivering them dynamically, like with CITRIX, through elastic layers or any of the other products, if you're building a new image through the Unidesk product, then that's completely different, because then you wouldn't have them both in there anyway.
Okay. Well, let's just turn it into a CITRIX App Layering webinar here. Does CITRIX App Layering work with a CITRIX virtual apps and desktop vDisk from PVS to bare metal, or only with the hypervisor? So,
Oh no, it works with PVS. No, it
but
works.
will
It can
it
deliver the
stream
image into PVS.
to bare metal, or is a hypervisor required? Like with HP Moonshot, or with if you're doing something
Well,
like
keep in
remote
mind what we're
PC.
talking about is delivering an image, first of all, right? So the ELM builds its image for PVS. Can it be done to physical? I mean, I think that's really what the question is
Right.
asking,
Yeah.
right? Can it be done to physical? Technically, yes. It's extraordinarily difficult though, because the ELM and the OS capture methodology is really based around virtual machines.
Virtual machines. Yeah.
Yeah. So how would, you got to think about, okay, I got to get the hardware drivers into the virtual machine so they're captured. And I mean, you can do these things, but it's not simple. It's not easy. We did have proof of concept long time ago of being able to do it, but it's just extremely difficult. If we could capture off of a physical machine, sort of a P to V type thing, or maybe P to ELM, that would be one thing. Then you could have the drivers and manipulate it and do all sorts of good stuff. But the ELM is really designed for virtual environments, capturing from virtual. All the packaging, everything is all based around dynamically creating virtual machines for the packaging, and all that good stuff.
Okay. I just looked in the CITRIX documentation where they're talking about the order of things to be installed in the platform layer. And for PVS and MCS and Horizon, joining the domain is listed as one of the steps for all three of the
Okay.
technologies for the platform layer.
I will admit I am out of date on that then.
Okay.
But
All right. So
that's new. I have to talk to Rob Zalowski about that. I didn't know they had changed that.
okay. So let's see. Comment platform layer is the only one joined to the domain. MCS requires the platform layer. Another comment, we have 6 different platform layers for multi-domain, and he does the multi-domain through the platform layers. Someone sent a link to the documentation that I just looked at. We always join the platform layer to the domain MCS to pull down policies per Carl Stowhood, the other Carl. That doesn't actually result in the VDAs being joined though. MCS does that. Next one.
Yeah, because
Okay.
because I know PVS and MCS have their own domain join, and if you think about it, if you sent an image, when you send that image down, it has its domain SID because it's joined to the domain. PVS and MCS need to change that so that there aren't 30 servers all using the same SID and all that good stuff that would just cause craziness.
Yeah. So I was just doing a series on a competing product to, Citrix. Um, and you always have differences of opinion as to when something should or should not be joined to the domain. So I was curious. So I went and looked in that vendor's agent documentation, and then I also looked in the installation Citrix's documentation for installing the VDA. Nowhere in there does it say that your master image must be domain joined in order to install the VDA. I think that was in older versions because they
Yeah.
required uh, domain join to do the VDA. But as long as you have name resolution in your master image, so that when you say, "Hey, I'm going to manually enter my delivery controllers," which is actually what Citrix recommends, you have to be able to resolve that DDC's FQDN in order for it to successfully go on. Okay. Da, 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 da. Other software and to include in the platform layer besides for software specified, you must include the following settings as a so how can they pre-scan layers for antivirus so that they do not get scanned on attach?
Oof, that's rough. I'm not sure that I'm going to be honest. I'm not sure that you really can. I mean, you could scan them ahead of time while you're creating the package, but I don't think the antivirus software, when it gets attached to an actual production VM, is going to accept those scans. I may be wrong, but it's a lot. That's been a common request, and based on how antivirus and anti-malware these things work, I'm not sure there is a real good way necessarily of doing it.
Okay. Is there any way to restrict what ends up in the full user layer, similar to FS Logic's profile container, where you can use the redirects.xml? Is there any equivalent way in app layering to exclude items from the container?
So it's funny. I just actually found out the other day that there is a file that or something that you can manipulate. It's not recommended. Both, and I'm going to say the word, Webster, for you. VMware App Volumes and App Layering do have a mechanism for restricting, but both of them say you're better off not to. Now, take that as you will. We all know we're all technology people. We do things we're not supposed to because it's better sometimes. Yeah, so the writable layers, those are, I don't know, maybe I'm old fashioned. The writable layers, the full writable layers, not the profile like FS Logics or, Office search redirection, all that good stuff, OST redirection. That's one thing. When you're talking about a full-blown writable layer, which both Citrix and VMware have, that scares me. It scares me because, one, they are always at the top. It captures by default literally everything. That's the part that scares me. Citrix has a repair mechanism. VMware, I believe, has some things you can do to try to repair. But the problem is if you cannot repair that writable layer, you lose everything anyway, because you're going to have to delete it and start over, or literally don't let the user use it. Try to crawl through the file system, delete what you think shouldn't be there. Then you got to somehow clean up the registry. It just gets ugly. They scare me. Now, saying that, I know talking with others that they have customers that are using those writable layers and are happy with them. So I can't say they just don't work. My opinion is they scare me, and it again, my opinion, take it for what it's worth. I personally wouldn't use them if I could avoid it, because there are also important things that they just can't do. Filter drivers, print drivers, anything like that. You can't just throw antivirus in there. And the biggest use case for writable layers is typically developers, and they're probably the ones with the worst type of apps that you would want to put into a writable layer, because depending on what they're doing, they could have all sorts of different things that get into the very low levels of the operating system that need to be there at boot. And since writable layers are user layers, user centric, they will never be there at boot. So simple things like, I say simple, but we all know printing is not simple. Print drivers can't be in a writable layer because it's too late. They need to be there when the system boots up, or you need to refresh the system, the printing subsystem, to get it to read it and get those drivers correct.
Okay. So the rest of the questions I'll let you answer after the fact. They'll wind up in the file that they'll receive,
Awesome.
because there's so many questions. We're going to be here for another hour and a half with you answering questions. So you need
And
to
we
get
haven't
off
even
so we can.
touched all the products yet.
No, So you go on with the webinar and you can answer the questions afterwards, and you can go through and answer them all, and people will get
Yeah,
answers to all the questions. All right.
sounds good.
So proceed
So let's dive a
with your
little bit
slide deck.
more into the CITRIX App Layering. This is obviously very near and dear to my heart, because I worked with this direct for seven plus years, or 7 years. So it's kind of my baby, I think. But basically, it does two delivery mechanisms. One is, like we talked about, the layered image. It takes, you specify a template, you specify the OS, which apps go on that template, go into that, and then the ELM creates it. And the great thing is CITRIX has done a very good job at distributing the load from the ELM to make the build of the layered image faster.
Faster,
Because it
yes,
is
yes, they
very
have.
disk intensive. Yeah. And, because the max you could do, you could say, I want to build 4 images at a time on this one little poor ELM. And whew, man, that was painful to wait through, because it was too much for one appliance to do. So they've done a
Okay,
very good job.
so someone's stating, yeah, the very bottom text on your slide is cut off.
It is?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I don't know, because on mine it looks okay, but I'm not looking.
What does the text say?
Layered image.
Layered image? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So the cool thing about this product is that it can create an image for almost anything. Hypervisor, provisioning mechanism, what have you. Really, the only thing it can't do is create individual desktops for users to do without a provisioning mechanism. So it really doesn't. It's really seriously just creating an image to be deployed by something else. But within this image, you turn on or off the guest layering services. These services is what determines if elastic layers will be mounted or not to a system, outside of also, user group, that type of thing. If this is not enabled, you will not get elastic layers whether you have access to them or not. And there's a whole back-end share infrastructure, network share SMB that you use, and just like any of these technologies, you want fast storage. These are very read intensive, but you also want good fast network between your endpoints and wherever this share is at. But the one thing, and I think we, back in the day, really confused the messaging initially with what this product, when we switched over to Unidesk 4, it was a bit confusing for people because really what this is an image management platform first. It uses layering to create the image. It's a means to an end to get the image out there. Elastic layering is kind of a not offshoot, but just sort of and I don't want to minimize this, but it's going to sound like I am, but it's kind of like just an extra feature in there for getting the rest of the layers that you may want out there. But it does a very good job at this. CITRIX has impressed me with the continuous updating and making this part especially better. Truthfully, I don't think they've done as much here as needs to be done, but part of that is just the architectural way that layering is done. Like I said, you got to mount one at a time, so you take hits. Like I said, they have added in the ability to delay when an app will get loaded, whether it's during login or after a user is logged in. Depending on your applications, that may or may not work for the end user. I will also say from a comparison standpoint, this is probably the simplest method of dynamically delivering layered applications. There's not a lot of nuance to it. It's user group or machine, but it's not truly what I would say is machine, because it still requires a user to log in for that machine assigned layer to attach. It's not attached at boot or anything like that. It does this, it does it well enough, I think, but again, my opinion is if you're looking for robust, this is not necessarily robust. But this is really what people need to be looking at first is because it is image management. Without this piece here, you don't get this at all. So if you aren't using app layering for your image management, you don't get elastic layers. This is not a separate piece you can install into any old image that's out there. So something to keep in mind. So VMware App Volumes, cognizant of time. I'm gonna try to get through this pretty quick. So what I've got is just a few slides left, and they're kind of all architectural. App Volumes can do, and one thing I forgot to say, and I did have it on a slide, most of these products work by VHD, right? VHD or VHDX. A couple of them do VMDK mounted applications, App Volumes obviously being one. Liquidware FlexApp also has kind of a same type side product that can do VMDKs. And in a pure VMware environment, this is pretty good for mount speed and responsiveness, things like that. But it's also a much more complicated architecture to have in place because you need SQL servers. it needs to communicate to the vCenter server. It needs the App Volumes Manager server, which you should probably have load balanced, and all these things. So the architecture gets more involved. But if you're using Vue, if you're staying native to the VMware environment, this is a good choice as well. I'm a VHD guy. VHDs, I think, give more flexibility than going VMDKs. But again, if you're not going outside of that environment, it works just as well. There are still limitations, even with 4, with the amount of app stacks that they recommend attaching to their VMs, which is kind of a bummer. I think that's the big part they need to work on. They still recommend putting more apps into an app stack. You can do 1 per app stack, but they really recommend putting in more, just because they don't want you having 15, 20 different disks, VMDKs attached to there. And I would say even up to 10. I don't think they recommend still up to 10 if you can get by with less. But it works. It does work. It's got the writable volumes. They've actually had writable volumes for quite some time. They've got the same profile redirection, OST office redirection volumes as well. And they do have the full, they do have the ability to exclude out of the full as well. Okay, so let's talk attaching. Attaching is extraordinarily different than layering. Now, this is how Liquidware shows it, and I think this is just a great analogy. So if you remember, app layering is a stack. App attachment is flat. They're puzzle pieces being attached to the operating system. What this allows to happen is these apps that are being attached can be attached in parallel. They don't have to wait for app 1 to finish before app 2 can be attached. So if you're looking strictly at login performance, attachment will almost always beat a layered app being delivered dynamically, simply because they can do these things in parallel, do more at once. And this is, like I said, the tact of Liquidware and the tact of MSIX App Attach. It works very well. Now, the way they do file conflicts, because there obviously will be file conflicts. I tried getting an answer for MSIX, and I don't have one yet. It appears that the way they mount, because they're using scripts, and I'll get into this in a minute, is that they are mounting one at a time, because it's literally a PowerShell script going line by line. So mount app 1. The last app that mounts is the one that kind of wins the file system, or the file between 2 apps. And what it seems to happen is that if there's a file conflict between an app and the operating system, the app wins. With Liquidware, the operating system always wins. If there's a conflict between the image, I should say, and the application. So, but this is a really great analogy. Attachment is flat. You can think of them as puzzle pieces. So it gives you some more flexibility. So FlexApp is the most feature rich of the layering umbrellaed products. If you're used to AppV and the way it could stream blocks down to an endpoint, FlexApp has it. They have native cloud storage support. It has a lot of good stuff. I will not deny that. And it works. It's easy to, easy to package. One of the great things they have is the ability that I always used to say, and I got this from the SEs over there, especially Jack Smith and some others, is that I can take my laptop on a plane. I could be at 35,000 feet. I can package a Flex app there and then deliver it to pretty, like any environment that's running Flex app, because there's nothing in a Flex app unless, the app requires it or whatever, but there's nothing in a Flex app that makes it specific, one, to the OS, outside of application compatibility, but also there's nothing that ties it to wherever it was packaged. So they've got both on-prem ability and cloud ability, and this can all be combined infrastructure into one. It's pretty darn slick. And yes, I did used to work for them. You can find my blogs out there. I do still, I do, my opinion is this is probably the best layering tech out there, just because it's so full featured. MSIX, this is interesting. So the current process, if you haven't played with MSIX yet, it's painfully manual at this point. Manuel Winkle just wrote this up, I think last week or the week before, possibly. Well, 6/16, there you go. And he steps through the entire process of getting it to work. And like I just said a few minutes ago, the way they are mounted currently is essentially running login scripts, a PowerShell login script. And so they do get mounted one at a time simply because of that. And it does only work with Windows 10, which to me is not much of a detriment, because truthfully, Microsoft should not be probably backporting this to Windows 7 anyway. And I think it is only Windows 10. I don't know about 2019, and I'm not sure about the session isolation. I've got questions submitted to some people at Microsoft that I'm waiting on answers for. When I do get those, I'm going to make those, hopefully be able to make those available, because I've got a lot of questions on what exactly how this is working. And then I wanted to send this over to, it's kind of a very high level compare of AppAttach actually to the other three products that I've talked about. So that's really about it. I know we're running 5 minutes over the hour. Is there any questions I can answer, or anything that someone wants to go more into? Carl, do you see anything?
Let's see. Most of these are dealing with CITRIX App Layering.
Okay.
There's
Is there? Yeah. Do you see anything? Yeah. I mean, do you see anything that's like layering? I mean, outside of app, I know the CITRIX App Layering, but is there like architecture, anything deep dive or?
Well, one guy just asked, what's your preferred layering product? Would that be the Flex app from Liquidware?
That would be the Flex app. If I had to choose between the four right now, it would be Flex app. But see, but again, see, I think the CITRIX App Layering throws kind of a curveball into that, because it is image management, but it does have elastic layering. But now the cool thing is that when I was at Unidesk, I had sold version 4 into a large retailer, worldwide retailer. And this was early. So take what I say knowing that it's much improved. The elastic layering has improved, but they were having problems with elastic layering. What I found out when I started at Liquidware is that Jack Smith went behind me and sold FlexApp into there for the dynamic delivery of applications. So they're using CITRIX App Layering for their image management, but they're using FlexApp for the dynamic application delivery. So those two can work well together, very well together.
You may have mentioned it earlier, but can you change the order that layers are applied?
You can, and each has their own mechanism of doing that. The last I saw was Rob Zalowski had a utility that you could run against basically the ELM that would allow you to change CITRIX App Layering layer priority. And I believe VMware has the ability to do that within their console. I may be wrong on that though, but they both have the ability to change layer priority.
How robust is app layering in Citrix Cloud?
That is a really good question. So here's the answer I'm going to give right now, because I think they're working. I know they're working on this stuff. Cloud, so especially Azure. As much as I love Azure and all the clouds, Azure disk performance is not the greatest. And when you're building the images, when you're packaging applications, it is all about disk performance. So it's hard because it's not a Citrix app. It's not a Citrix problem per se, but they are hindered by that performance on Azure. So, hopefully there'll be ways to get around it at some point. If you're, looking strictly at cloud and especially Citrix Cloud. But if you're looking at doing everything within the cloud, you're probably going to have image building wait times longer than what you would see on-prem. Now, you can do your packaging on-prem, export your layers, and then import them into the ELM for like all the layers, because you can export import into various ELMs. So if you wanted elastic layers in the cloud, you could import those in. So you could like create the image on-prem, push it up to your provisioning mechanism in the cloud, just Azure copy or whatever, and then import in the elastic layers that you want to deliver into the ELM or up to the share, and then go from there.
Okay.
Oh, that's a question I don't know. I've wanted Silverlight gone for a long time. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So,
I wish I had a better answer.
yeah. Especially for someone like me who's colorblind, the ELM current interface is
Oh
very
yeah, the
difficult
green.
for someone who's colorblind to work
Yeah.
with. Yeah. So when does using app layering not make sense versus just using PVS images?
I mean that's I don't know that I can really answer that question, because I mean that's kind of an environment by environment answer. You may already have processes in place. You may have SCCM builds that you're using to push into PVS already. You may have automated a lot of it. You may, so it's difficult to say. The only really, but yeah, it is a typical answer. But I think in this one, it's legit. I mean, I can't speak for a company and really say. The only thing is that if you want elastic layering, you have to be using the layered images. That's the only way to get those. So that's really, when does it make sense? When you want elastic layering.
So a previous question, and I put a comment on it, and then it's coming back asking something else. But one of the criticisms that I have seen against CITRIX App Layering is because there's no API, there is no PowerShell, there's no way to automate the entire process. But if you've already have a thoroughly tested and well-maintained build process, whether it be MDT, SCCM, combination of tools, if you've already had that, why would you even look at CITRIX App Layering?
Like I said, the only reason at that point would be you want elastic layers. But if you're looking for that dynamic delivery, I don't think you should switch up your entire automation, your entire provisioning mechanism just to get elastic layers. There's Flex App out there, App Attach is coming, and there's options. There's options out there. So no, I don't. If you don't want to upend your systems for dynamic, then don't. There's other options out there. Absolutely, I agree with that. Not every product out there is going to be a fit for everybody. I mean, that's the bottom line. And I know people, you get all this stuff in bundles, right? I mean, app layering, app volumes, app attach now, they all come in bundles. And my answer always is you have to test those first, right? Because you own them. You're doing yourself and the company, your company, a disservice by not putting them through their paces. Now, you put them through their paces, they don't fit your needs. You now have a documented trail to say, well, we need to bring in this third-party product because what we have doesn't do this, this, and this other product does, and all that good stuff. So you have to, because you own it. Doesn't mean you have to use it, but you do have to at least test it to from a business perspective to be able to sell whatever else you want to bring in. And that's not just Citrix or VMware. That's any product you get in a bundle.
All right. Let's see. What's our time? So we're 15 minutes over?
Yeah,
So someone
should we be tying it
there
up? I
any
don't
way
know.
to use elastic layers in a multi-domain setup with no trust, since access to the share is always used with the user's domain account? Only way I can think of you'd have to use like some type of anonymous access or something.
Yeah, you'd
I don't
have to,
think any
like
security
open up the
teams.
guest account or some crazy thing,
Yeah, I
and you
don't think
don't
any
want to be
security
doing
team.
that.
Yeah, no security team is going to allow that. So I
Yeah,
I don't know of a way to do that.
no.
If
Like I
there's no
said, maybe
trust,
through guest or something, but there's a reason they disable that stuff right out of the box now.
yeah.
And why Citrix doesn't even do anonymous accounts like they used to.
Yeah, I'm glad they stopped creating those 15 anonymous user accounts on
Yep.
every install. Even if you did the checkbox, don't create anonymous accounts. No, sorry, we're still going to.
Yeah, you made the choice, but we're going to ignore you.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see here. If login times are a concern, would it be better to package with CITRIX App Layering and then mask with FX Logics if possible, or is it better to just use elastic layers?
If you're looking at login times, putting FS Logics into like the platform layer and then building the layered image, that would be the faster way of doing it, using FS Logics basically over Elastic. If you aren't a fan of putting everything in the kitchen sink into an image, even if it's masked, like I said, right out of the 4 products there, FlexApp would be the one that I would look at.
Okay. All right.
And yeah, I'm not trying to be a shill for liquidware. It's just that is truly my opinion on it. So
Okay. All right. Well, there's a few more questions out there, but they're so the questions are so specific, that
yeah,
instead of just
yep,
doing a it depends answer, I'll just let you answer some of them
sure,
after.
yeah,
So they'll go in the report.
sounds
Yeah, and I
good.
can send you the full list afterwards, Jeff, and then we can put something together. And if you want to, we can either put them in a forum thread, or forum post on CHC, or you can write a blog, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Um, uh,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
always looking for that stuff.
I'll get the questions answered, and when I find out more about the app attach, how it works a little bit better under the hood, I will pass along that information as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I just have one more little thing for you guys. Let me grab back the screen. So I have 3 2020 CGC t-shirts to give away. And the first 3 people to get the right answer get a shirt. So let me pop out the question panel and see who's got it. All
Is
right,
C the correct answer?
I do. I see. Hold on. Whoa, because some people typed in
Yeah.
letters.
Yeah. So
Oh,
if
sweet.
C is
Yeah.
27,000, then you got Jared Kendall, Todd Simmons, Justin Miller are your first three.
Good job, guys. I didn't think anybody would know. What did I say before that? Now, Webster had a different question that he wanted to ask, and we're not going to give away shirt for it, but we can ask it.
Yeah.
Who on the call? Oh, go ahead, Webster. You do it.
Yeah. So who on this call is an original member of the first CTP class? Abdiraham Gur got the right answer. Yeah, it wasn't
Woo!
me. Wasn't me. I didn't come along till 2009. Jeff was in the very first CTP class back. When was that? 2006?
I'd have to look at my letter that I got. It was the right after the first Bri Forum,
Yeah, so
actually.
it'd be
Ron
around
Ogilvy,
2006.
Sean Bass,
Yeah.
Brian Madden, myself, and yeah, quite the
Rick,
group. Quite the
Rick
group to be part
someone
of.
from Australia, wasn't it?
Rick Mack. Yes, Rick Mack. Great guy. I don't know what happened, but he's a great guy.
I hope he's still around. I've not heard about him or from him in ages.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't either. I haven't either, but yeah, he was big, very intelligent, very smart guy.
Well, that would have been a
All
good
right.
question. I should have listened to you, Webster.
Yeah. So only one person got that answer correct.
Well, then we would have only given away one shirt. That would have been hard. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff. We did a webinar recently with Login VSI, and this presentation came out of that. And Jeff he was then in that webinar as an attendee, and he kept putting questions and answering questions in the chat. And then afterwards, he emailed me and was like, please let me do a presentation on app layering. And I was like, yes, do. It sounds like we need to. So, Jeff, I really appreciate you doing this. Sounds like it was much needed. And there were so many questions, like so many. That's really great. So I
Yeah,
really
and I
appreciate you
really
doing it.
hope that it helps kind of level set the knowledge for everybody, so they understand the different products, how it all works, and they, when they are looking, to make a purchase or evaluate, they now, my whole idea was, I want to make sure that they understand what they're evaluating, um, and not just kind of going in with an unknown, very obscure idea of what layering is and how it works. So
Thank you so much. And Webster, always a pleasure. Thank you for moderating today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, guys. Well, I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend, and wherever you are, enjoy the rest of your day, and hope you all stay healthy and safe and happy. And we hope to see you on another CUGC webinar again soon. Take care, everyone.
All right.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome. Yeah,
Bye. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say we kept the majority of the attendees,
That's
for
a
the
good thing.
entire thing. Yeah, very good thing. There was a lot of interest. I mean, man, it was hard to keep up with the questions.
Well, we'll get them answered and out to everybody. I promise that.
All right.
Nice job, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Y'all have a good weekend.
You too. Bye.
Yeah, you too.
Bye bye.